Okay. Today we're going to look at Hallel, since today's Rosh Chodesh. Well, it's still fresh in your minds. Hallel is just 6 of the Psalms. 113 through 118. Today we left off 2 half Psalms because it's only a custom, not an absolute law, to read Hallel today. The first of them is extremely rich in content and in structure. So we'll spend, I think, most of our time on the first one, 113. This is on page 633 in the Siddur. And the most of it will be on the end of the psalm. But let's first of all read through it and notice that it has a pretty clear general structure. It starts, give praise, you servants of Hashem, praise the name of Hashem, blessed be the name of Hashem from this time forever, rise and sun of setting, Hashem's name is praised. That's the first 3 verses, and they're all obviously about praising Hashem. Then comes, high above all nations is Hashem, above the heavens is His glory. Who is like Hashem, a God who's enthroned on high, yet deigns, we'll question that translation when we get there, to look upon the earth, upon the heaven and the earth. Those 3 verses are all about Hashem being high up, whatever that means, but they're all about that subject. So that's 1 through 3 and 4 through 6. Now come the last 3 verses. He raises the needy from the dust, from the trash heaps He lifts the destitute, to seat them with nobles, the nobles of His people. He transforms the barren wife into a glad mother of children. Here, Hashem helps people who are unfortunate in some way or other. So it divides into 3 threes. Now, let's take a look at some of the details of the first 6. And then, as I said, the last 3 we'll spend a considerable amount of time on. First of all, give praise, you servants of Hashem. Is that what we call in Hebrew a mute? Is that a restriction? We're not talking to everybody. We're only talking to the servants of Hashem. The commentators are split. One says servants of Hashem is just a way of describing the whole of the Jewish people, and then we can understand why this would be addressed to the Jewish people and not to the rest of the world. But others say this is talking about the sages and the righteous people and the leaders. They specifically are being told to give praise. Why would that be? And in fact, the next verse, which we say, everybody says, it's not just to the top 5%. So it does seem like we're all going to do it. I want to introduce you to a philosophical idea. Maybe a couple of you have heard this, but I don't think everybody's heard it. Praise. When someone says that something is a great painting or a great move in basketball or a great speech or whatever it is, when he says it's great, is he expressing how he feels about it? Is it what we call subjective? Or is he describing some objective feature that it has? Could praise be criticized as wrong? No, you're wrong. You say it's great, you're wrong. Or am I just expressing how I feel? Nobody can tell me that's wrong. Most people intuitively feel that praise is subjective. It's just a matter of expressing your reaction to something. John Stuart Mill pointed out that this is not correct. This was first brought to my attention by Rabbi Donnie Deutsch of Chicago a long time ago, 1981. Imagine the following scenario. You meet a person and you're talking to him and it becomes clear that he doesn't know what basketball is. He doesn't know what it is. You say, wow, where have you been living, in a cave? You don't know what basketball is? I'll show you something terrific. So you take him to a game and the teams are warming up. And while they're warming up, he suddenly grabs your arms and says, did you see that? What a great shot. He jumped into the air, and while he was in the air, he threw the ball through the hoop. What a great shot. He made a jump shot for the foul line. What do you say to him? Calm down. Calm down. That's not a great shot. High school kids can do that. Maybe in the course of the game, you'll see one or two really great shots. But that wasn't a great shot. When you said it was a great shot, you're wrong. Because one aspect of things that are great is that they aren't common. That's a feature of being great. Someone that gets that wrong has made a mistake in saying that it's great. Okay, so then there can be standards for greatness. Now, if praise is something which is subjective, not everybody's praise is equally valid. There are people who are opera critics. They go to hear a performance, and they sit there at the performance with their laptop. The soprano was magnificent, her voice rang like a bell. The fellow playing the timpani was offbeat half the time, and he was terrible. Why do they pay him to do that? He's having his experience, and I'm having my experience. Nobody cares what I say about it. He's an expert in opera. So what he says about it reflects its real character, whereas mine will be off base to a great extent. So praise is objective. If praise is objective, then some people know it better, and some people know it worse. The servants of Hashem, those who are closest to Hashem, are the most qualified to praise Him. So the first praise comes from them, and we can imitate them. We can learn from them. And this is enshrined in something which I think you all know. When you say, Kadosh, Kadosh, it's Kadosh, Hashem Tzvakos, Lo Chol Ha'aretz Kvodo, when you say, holy, 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 you start by saying, we are going to say what the angels say. Why do you mention that? Why do you care about that? Just say it. Because we couldn't say it on our own. It's not something that we could perceive. It's not something we could come to on our own. We needed the angels to reveal it to us. So we quote them. So that's the starting point here, is giving license to those who are close to Hashem to praise, and then the rest of us can follow along. That's an important piece of philosophy. I mean, that might be an oxymoron for you, but okay, I think it's important. Now, let Hashem's name be blessed or praised. Bavarach can be another word for praised. From now and forever. From the rising of the sun to its setting, Hashem's name is praised. Now, let me ask you a very simplistic question. If you just said it should be forever, why would you bother to mention from sunrise to sunset? First of all, it's only daytime, and forever, I guess, would include nighttime. Why bother mentioning it? The commentators are very clear on this. From sunrise doesn't mean from when it rises, it means from where it rises. It means from east to west. It's geographical, not temporal. So you have covering all time and covering all habitation, and that way everything is included. So this is a little bit about praising Hashem. Now, what does it mean to describe Hashem as high? Notice here, let's see how they translate this. High above all nations, above the heavens is His glory. If you think God lives in heaven, you can go to Norway and the Norse gods. The creator of the universe doesn't live in heaven. He doesn't live anywhere in our terms of living, and certainly has no physical location. Now, the next words in the English are, who is like Hashem, our God, who is enthroned on high, yet deigns. I'm sure you've never seen that word before in your life. What's a deign? Or what does to deign mean? I haven't got a clue. I mean, if I were writing this, at least I'd put a footnote to see what it means. The literal word in Hebrew means he lowers himself. Hamashpili. Lashpil means to lower something down. Take something high and push it down, lower. Saying here he has to lower himself to look at the heavens, because he transcends the heavens as well. He's high above nations. You know, people who are looking for a meaningful way of life often look for things that are bigger than themselves. My father always used to say to me, don't die for small causes. Look for something that's really worthwhile. You have talents, you have abilities. Look for something that's really worthwhile. Many people find what's worthwhile, what's valuable in the nation. acting on behalf of the success of the nation. Whether Nathan Hale said it or not, but the motto of I regret that I have but one life to give for my country, you hear where that's coming from. That's not just insanity. The opportunity to risk and even give my life for something like the freedom of my nation is worth it. That's a big consequence. It's a big value. So some people do look for that kind of value in the relationship to a nation. I'm not saying that's wrong, but Hashem is above all the nations. So if you dedicate your life to Hashem, you're transcending any value you could possibly get by identifying with your nation. So what are we being told here when we talk about God as being high in that sense? Well, in the study of religion, there are two words that people use, transcendent and immanent. Transcendent means beyond, and immanent means present within. And when religions talk about the deities that they believe in, worship, serve, there's a discussion how that deity relates to the world. And typically in religions, there's a choice. Either the deity is some feature of the world itself, that's called pantheism, or the deity transcends the world, could be a creator, and thereby is above and beyond the world. Now, very often when in thinking you have an alternative, it's either A or B, because they're different and because they look like they are in tension with one another, and it looks like you'd better choose, often the Torah says we're doing both. There's tension, live with the tension. The tension is closer to the reality than choosing one or the other. And in this case, it's in all the literature that Hashem both transcends and is immanent. A creator cannot be just immanent. It can't be just a piece of the world. He's going to be the creator of it. But he doesn't create it and go on holiday, like the deists say. He creates it and manages it down to the smallest detail. So, that being the case, he is involved in the world and also transcends the world. Now, when you picture him as transcending, then you picture him as embodying a purpose that the whole creation has to serve. When you picture him as immanent, you picture him as, so to speak, Kiviyachol, 13 times, responding to local conditions. A person made a decision, and that because he made that decision, the outcome will be one thing. Had he made a different decision, the outcome will be a different thing. God is, so to speak, interacting with the local affairs in the world. And both are going on simultaneously. And they're related in subtle ways, which I'm not going to go into right now. When you picture him as above everything, you're picturing him as acting in terms of the overall purpose of the entire creation. So the next three verses are very important. What they describe God as doing in the next three verses is somehow an embodiment of the whole purpose of creation. Okay, now let's take a look and see what the last three verses say. He raises the needy from the dust, from the trash heaps, he lifts the destitute, to seat them with nobles. Now, the commentators do allow the translation of the Hebrew word here, nadiv, as a noble, but actually the inner meaning of the word nadiv means to be open-hearted, generous, good-hearted. We're talking about nadiv leiv. And at least one of the commentators that I saw this morning when I was learning this says, it's talking about a person who gives to others. Let's call him a philanthropist. Now, if you think about it, these words aren't obvious. You have a person who's needy or who's destitute. He doesn't have enough to live on. How do you rectify that? What's the opposite? The opposite of destitute is either rich or comfortable. What has charity got to do with it? Why would charity be the contrast to destitute or poor? We'll put it on the side, we'll come back to that. And then he transforms the barren wife into a glad mother of children. Well, I hope you don't experience this personally, but infertility is a terrible, terrible challenge for people to have to live with, deal with, and overcome. It's a challenge to keep your character noble. It's a challenge to keep your trust in the Kodesh Baruch Hu strong. It's a challenge to build your interpersonal relationships through or in spite of the aspects of infertility. It's a big, big deal. And Hashem takes care of that. So on the surface, Hashem here is taking care of people who are in need. Of course, it's 2 out of 100 possible choices. Doesn't talk about sickness per se. It doesn't talk about accidents. Doesn't talk about suffering injustice. I mean, there are lots of things that people go through that Hashem does save them from. Why you pick these 2? And why pick the subject of helping unfortunates altogether? Why would that be somehow the epitome of what God runs the world for? So there's a statement in the Talmud. 4 people aren't totally alive. The words in Hebrew are nechshav and kameis, but if you look it up in the dictionary, it's much too strong. They do have to keep mitzvahs, and you do have to save their lives, and so on and so on. But they have the missing and essential ingredient of life. 4 categories of people, of whom 2 are here. Now, the 4 are someone who's poor, someone who's blind, someone who's childless, and someone who has tzaras. Those 4 are called not fully alive. Well, let's see. What do they have in common? Why would they all 4 get this common designation? And somehow, maybe there are others who are also similar, but these are somehow outstanding examples of it. The standard explanation, there are probably other explanations I don't know. The standard explanation is this. What they are missing is the normal range of opportunities to do chesed, to do loving kindness. And they're missing it in 2 different ways. 2 out of the 4 are missing the resources with which to do loving kindness. And 2 out of the 4 are missing the contact with those who are needy to do the loving kindness too. So let's take a look. A person who's poor, you remember Hurricane Sandy in New York? And people were stranded, and people came in SUVs to the airports and at Kennedy and drove people to their houses and put them up and gave them food. If you don't have an SUV, you can't do that. If you don't have a big house, you can't do that. If you don't have extra food, you can't do that. You can't do that chesed. There are a lot of acts of kindness that you can do with material resources that if you don't have, you can do other things. You could give advice. You could help someone plan the decorating of his living room. You could do some types, but there's a whole dimension of loving kindness that you're restricted in if you don't have material resources. A blind person is, to a great extent, dependent upon others and can't do for others the things that sighted people can do. Again, you can give advice and you can lend money, but non-sighted people, they cannot take a hike through the forest all by themselves, typically. So there again, they lack the resources to do the normal range of resources to do chesed for others. A childless person, when you will have children, you will discover well springs of loving kindness in yourself that you never dreamt existed. I've had the experience of taking a child who's crying and holding the child and walking up and down, holding the child for an hour. Yeah. And not feeling I'm going to lose sleep or this is other things I wanted to do. It's my child. My child is crying. If I can do something to relieve the crying, I'm certainly going to do it. You discover in yourself a source of loving kindness that you didn't know existed. So if you haven't had that experience, you may not know the kind of loving kindness that you're capable of. And similarly, for the person who has tsaras, he's isolated. He's exiled from the city. He dwells alone. When someone approaches, he has to yell, I'm tummy, stay away from me. So he's isolated. So he doesn't have contact with other people to be able to do chesed to them. So here in the Psalm, 2 out of 4 are chosen, and I believe one of each of the 2 subcategories. And I think the Psalm chose the one that's more common. Poverty is more common than blindness, and childlessness is more common than tsaras is. So what the Psalm here is doing is giving a picture of people who are in desperate need and who Hashem helps. But they're not only in desperate need. They're not only in desperate need. The kind of need that they have means they aren't fully alive. That's what the Talmud is telling you. Why? Because the essential element of life is doing loving kindness. And if you're handicapped in doing loving kindness, then your life isn't full. Now, this idea is captured by the one leftover question, which I didn't answer. Why does it say that he lifts up the needy and the destitute and places them with the philanthropists? What's wrong with poverty? What's wrong with it? There's suffering. Yes, of course. There are a lot of conditions in life that cause suffering. What's wrong with poverty is not that the person doesn't have enough for himself. What's wrong with poverty spiritually is that he doesn't have enough to give to others. That's the spiritual crippling in it. Because doing loving kindness is life. And this person is handicapped in performing life functions. That's why it says he lifts him up and places him with So when the Tehillim here says that Hashem picks up the poor and puts them with philanthropists, and he takes the barren woman and makes her a mother of children, what it's saying is he's giving them life. He's giving them life. In particular, he's giving them spiritual life. That's what Hashem is doing with the creation. From beyond and above, the purpose overall of the entire creation is to give spiritual life to people. That's what it's all about. I think most of what I'm saying now comes from the Rachal, and that makes this particular psalm really extremely powerful, extremely fundamental. And to start Hallel with it, I think is really gigantic. Questions up to here?
That's what means who revivifies from dead.
I'm sorry, say it again.
That what means, when you pray Shemona Esrei, you all the time repeat, he who revivifies.
Okay, that's very interesting question. He who makes the dead live, and the second blessing says that 5 times. And I think you're right. I believe it's the Abu Draham, the earliest full sefer that we have on prayer, an early Rishon. It says 5 times. You're quoting it correctly. The English word revivifies the dead. Okay, revivify, another word like Danes, which you never heard and you don't need to know. The strict Hebrew there is makes the dead live. Mechayeh means to make live, and Mesim is dead. So if you're talking about the resurrection at the end of history, that's the Sheni Afar. He keeps his promise to the people who are sleeping in the dust. But all the other ones, 5 times, not going to talk about the resurrection of dead 5 times. So he says all the things that happen in the world that enable you to live, all of them. And if you learn a little chemistry and a little history and a little geography and the rest, you see an amazing group of facts, all of which are necessary for people to live, so to live successfully. You know that when you have ice and you put an ice cube in your glass of water, it floats, right? Why does it float? Aren't solids more compact than liquids? They are in every other substance we know about. But in water, it's most dense at 4 degrees centigrade. When it gets colder, it gets less dense. It expands. I just saw an accounting of the current state of water. Water is tremendously mysterious. The latest thoughts on water are that water has two forms, two ways that molecules can relate to one another, one more dense and one more spread out, less dense. Both liquids. It has a gaseous state and a solid state also, but as a liquid, it has the two states, and it alternates between the two states, and at different temperatures, it alternates different ways in an extremely complex dance, and much of the time, it's a mixture of the two of them, and that gives it some of its qualities that other liquids don't have, because it's really two states of water existing simultaneously and transforming into one another. Nobody has a molecular explanation of this, obviously. It's just something that they believe helps explain what's going on. And they want to suggest that's why all the life that we know is based on water. Is there any reason why it couldn't have life that's based on oil, or life that's liquid methane or something else? Well, no other liquid of which we're aware has this kind of very, very complex structure. And maybe that's necessary for life. At any rate, when you read about these things and you see, if ice sank to the bottom of your glass as it would with any other solid, any other liquid, then in the winter, the rivers would freeze solid. Because the ice would form on the top, sink to the bottom, and the cold air, which is much colder than 0 degrees centigrade, would form again, it would fall to the bottom, and all the fish would die, and all the plant life would die. Frozen to death. That wouldn't be good for human agitation on land. And even the seas, in certain areas, would freeze solid. So, one said it was a miracle. There's no explanation for it so far. Who knows? But we'll ever explain why water behaves the way it does. At any rate, Mechayim Mesim does include that. So now what you're saying is, once you take life to include spiritual life, and you see that Kodesh Baruch Hu provides the means for a spiritual life, it could be included over there. I think you're right. I think that's a nice observation. Okay, let's take a look at the next psalm. Israel went out of Egypt, Jacob's household from a people of alien tongue. Judah became a sanctuary, Israel his dominions. Now, this idea of a foreign tongue is something which we have very often. What's the idea of a foreign tongue, and why is that important? Let me tell you, academia is rife with this sort of thing. About the end of the 19th century, there was a French savant, a French scientist, who made the following observation. Pity poor English, and be thankful that you're French. Because in French, you have a noun, and the adjective comes after the noun. That's because that's what you think. You think of an object, and you think of its qualities. In English, the adjective comes before the noun. Now, pity poor English. Your mind thinks object properties, and he's saying properties, object. It's backwards. So he's crippled. The poor Englishman is crippled. Yeah, but boys and girls, that's dumb. The language that you learn affects how you think. So the Englishman doesn't think like a Frenchman and suffer with English. He doesn't think like a Frenchman. That's typical for, okay, we're good with geopolitics. So the language you learn has an effect on how you think, how you see the world, how you perceive the world, how you experience the world. Well, then it makes a difference what language you speak. This is true for the grand structure of language, and it's certainly true for the concepts. Your dictionaries are full of mistakes. Full of mistakes. Anybody here know any Hebrew? You know Hebrew? What's a nachal? A river or a stream. And therefore, in the book of Genesis, it says, the servants of Isaac dug in the nachal and found water. Oh, I get it. They dug in the river and found... They dug in the river? And they found water? No, nachal means riverbed. It means a wadi. That's what a nachal means.
Like a
That's right. It might have water in it, it might not. Also, the word yam in many psukim refers to the seabed, not to the water. Kamayim la yam mechasi. Like water fills the yam. So the yam isn't the water. There's lots of mistakes like that. A mabul. A mabul is a flood. Oh, that's why it says in Genesis, the mabul was waters on the face of the earth. And the poor English reader reads, the flood was waters of the... Was, eh? But my 6-year-old knows that. Why is the Torah telling me that a flood is waters on the face of the earth? Answer, because the word mabul doesn't mean flood. The word mabul is not related to water at all. It's related to what I would call an entropizer, something that increases entropy by increasing disorder. It's a destructive force, a general destructive force. And that's why after the flood, the verse says, I won't bring any more water, and I won't bring any mabul. 2 statements. Not only not of water, but I won't bring it of something else either. Okay, all these are just technical. What about the word shalom? Shalom is pretty important. We ask for it a lot. The dictionary will tell you shalom means peace. That's a terrible distortion. In English, peace is a negative concept. It means absence of difficulty or disturbance or disorder or noise or whatever. In English, you can say that the graveyard is very peaceful. You cannot say that the graveyard is shalom. Sorry, you can't do it. Because the root of shalom is shalem, which means complete, whole, integrated, sometimes used for perfect. That's not just negative, it's positive. That's why when the Americans say we're going to try to get to peace in the Middle East and the Israelis are talking about having shalom, they're not talking the same subject. All the Americans want is to stop shooting bullets at each other. And we have in Hebrew the idea shalom kar and shalom cham. And in English you have it a little bit also, a cold peace. At any rate, so here the language that you speak is very important. Now when you live, I'm just learning this morning, people who live among others who are have a language are affected by that language. Even when we're living in Egypt. So some of us were slaves and some of us were not. Those who were slaves interacted with the Egyptians all the time. True, they may have been brought up at home to speak Hebrew, and maybe they spoke Hebrew to each other at home. But when they spoke to the Egyptians, they spoke Egyptian. And that means that the Egyptian language has an effect on how you think. So to take us out of the environment of a nation that speaks another language is a very important feature of our attaining our freedom from that circumstance. If you say, I think almost everybody says this, the Rambam is explicitly against it, but almost everybody says this, that other languages are conventional. There's absolutely no reason why CHAIR should name the thing you're sitting on, rather than CAT or BALL. They're just sounds and letters. Hebrew isn't like that. Hebrew is a language where the words are essentially related to the reality. If you want an example, think of chemistry. The names of the compounds, H2O isn't just like Tom or Ralph. H2O tells you the structure of the molecule. There's 2 hydrogen atoms plus an oxygen atom. So they gave you a nomenclature, as they say, a system of names, where if you know the name, you know what it looks like. You know what it's made of. It's not arbitrary at all. It really describes the reality. In Hebrew, the letters and the words describe reality. This is part of what's indicated when it says that God brought the animals to Adam and let Adam name them. It wasn't that he was creating arbitrary sounds. Oh, I think horse sounds nice for that one. I think, caterpillar sounds nice for that one. He was using the letters with their meanings to construct a symbol that will portray, like a picture portrays it, will portray what the thing is in and of itself. Then it becomes extremely important to be fluent in Hebrew, and especially even to start your children in Hebrew. They may have to learn other languages later, but your your Sfat Aim, your mother's tongue, is how you think. To this day, when I'm looking up Hebrew letters to spell something, it's N and K, and I'm not looking for a Nun and a Kaf, but in my mind they're English letters. So that's the idea of taking you out of the control of people of alien tongue. So a concept that's found very often in our. Now, the sea saw and fled, Jordan turned backwards, the mountains skipped like rams. The various commentators have various ways of explaining this. There were events in Jewish history where the natural environment responded. So, when they were encamped at the sea and the Egyptians were bearing down on them, the danger was resolved by Moses gesturing with his staff, and the sea split, and they crossed where the land was dry. And then the Egyptians came in to pursue them, and the sea collapsed on them and drowned them. That's the case where Jewish people were coming, and the sea saw the Jewish people, or saw Hashem, who's the one who's behind the Jewish people, or saw Hashem who's behind the nature of water. The commentators have they saw and it split so as to enable that. When they came to enter the land of Israel, the Jordan River's in the way. And the similar thing happened. The Jordan River stopped. And when it stopped, the water in front of them drained, and it was dry. And according to some commentators, like the Malbim, the water that was flowing down piled up in a pillar. And they crossed over while it was dry, and then came crashing down and continued to flow. So that's the Jordan. The mountains, the Torah tells us explicitly at the revelation of Sinai, the mountain was shaking under their feet, and there was smoke and cloud at the top of the mountain. So the mountain was trembling. And now so as the speaker addresses these natural features. What's going on? Why are you behaving the way you're behaving? Jordan turning backward, mountains skip like rams, hills like young. And says, before the Lord's presence, did I, the earth, tremble before the presence of Hashem of Jacob? Now, it's not obvious why, when Hashem reveals himself, the response should be trembling and fear. Indeed, sometimes it isn't. So that means that we're talking about instances here where the fear was necessary. The fear it had a purpose. And then the psalm ends with, turns the rock into a pond of water. Now, there are two incidents depicted in the Torah where the people needed water, and water came from stone. Commentators here say that what you're talking about is acting against nature. Nature has certain rules. You can call them laws if you like. Just the maker of the laws isn't bound by the laws. And when Hashem comes to affect the world in a way that's against its nature, our picture of the elements of the world is that there's a certain commitment built into them to behave in a certain way. It's as if they're animate and they've been given a certain position and a certain responsibility, and they operate in terms of the nature that's given to them. So much so that the Midrash says Hashem made a condition with the water. Yes, I'm creating you. Yes, I'm making you a liquid. A liquid flows to the lowest possible level. And that's what I want you to do. All the time, except once. Once I don't want it to be that way. And I know I made you to be this way, but I'm telling you, there'll be a time when you won't be able to be that way. You have to be otherwise. It's a kind of recognition of the value of the constancy of the nature of the thing, with also recognition that there'll be times when It can't be so. So when something's coming to, so to speak, overrule your nature, you feel that as something which unnerves you. And that's part of the idea here that this is so. I think this is similar at the Revelation Sinai. This is hinted at in Shmos and in Dvarim. It's much more explicit. The people say the following. They say to Moses, we heard God speaking. We now see that God can speak to man and man will live. Therefore, listen carefully, therefore, we don't want to do it ever again because we're afraid of dying. So from now on, you do it. So the reader says, hey, now wait a second. Come on, guys. You succeeded, right? You did live. And therefore you don't want to do it again? And the answer is, we felt that we just barely made it. We didn't sail over the finish line. And we have no confidence that we're going to make it again. And indeed, the Midrash tells us that when Hashem said the first word of the 10 pronouncements of Sinai, Anochi, they all died. They all did die. And then Hashem brought them back to life. Why did they die? Because when the creator of the universe says, I, nothing else can stand. There's nothing equal to that I. That I is what gives existence to everything else. And everything else is just a product of that I. So strictly speaking, there can't be a dialogue, an interaction, a sharing, a partnership between a creator and a creature. Hashem goes above that logic. He brings it back to life and says, even though I'm the one who's giving you life, I want to have this relationship with you. And I can manage this. But now if you went through that, I think you would be unnerved. I think it would be something that you would be upset about or feel afraid of. And indeed, after it's over, Hashem says, who could guarantee for me that they would have this heart to fear me forever and keep my commandments? So it's clear that Hashem wanted that reaction. And then you understand, why was there a fire at the top of the mountain? And why was there a cloud? And why was the ground trembling under their feet? And why was the sound of the shofar? Who needs all that? What's it for? Speak calmly. Speak in a calm voice that everybody can hear and consider and relate to and feel love. No. He wanted the sense of his transcendence to be manifest. And we should relate to that. That's the foundation. As I said at the beginning, Hashem Sholem, he only asks Yira from you. Everything else is built on that platform. Here's where he produced it. And even though Chazal record that Moses was upset with us that we asked for him to be an intermediary, the verses in the Torah say that God was happy with us. Everything they said was wonderful, because that's the platform that he wanted. So here you're having a picture here in the second Psalm of Hallel of the same reaction that the natural world had when the Gottlieb came to take us out of Egypt.
Thank you, Rabbi.
You're welcome.